So the objective for today is to learn how to find the lowest common denominator in fractions. By us following these steps and finding the lowest common denominator, we're gonna be able to do some mental math, which will help you find equivalent fractions, subtract, or add fractions. Okay. We cannot add, subtract, or compare any fraction when the denominators are different. So I've written down 1/2 and 1/3. And it doesn't matter what we're going to do with both of these fractions. It's really hard to tell what's bigger, what's smaller, how to subtract, how to add, if we don't have previous knowledge of fractions. So I'm going to go ahead and write new fractions for you. And the first one's going to be 2/4. And the second one will be 3/8. Okay, so again, it doesn't matter what I plan to do with these fractions. In order for me to add, subtract, compare, or find equivalent fractions, I need to make these fractions have the same denominator. When they have different denominators, it's like we're comparing apples to oranges. And I'll explain more about that. So, to do any of the above functions, we have to find the lowest common denominator. Step 1, write the fraction problem vertically. I'm going to make this subtracting. I'm going to make it adding better. All right? Yeah. So we need to write the problems vertically, right? Which means what? What's vertically? Going up and down. Good. 2/4 and 3/8. Now it's still the same problem. It's just now going vertically. Step 2. You need to find the lowest common denominator. To find the lowest common denominator, you need to multiply or skip count until you arrive to a number that the other denominator has in common with the number you are currently working on. Make sure that it is the lowest or smallest or first number that is found in both sets of numbers. Circle the numbers that they have in common. That number circled is your lowest common denominator. So I will give you an example. So here, so step 2 will be to find the lowest common denominator. I am going to get the denominator, which is 4. That's step 2. Step 1, step 2. So I'm going to find the lowest common denominator. That's the acronym for it. I am going to get 4 and 8. I'm going to make a table. Yeah. Okay. So and observe how this helps me. So I need to skip count. And I always start with 4 times 1. With times 1 of the denominator. So 4 times 1 equals 4 times 2 equals
8
times 3 equals
10
times 4 equals 16 times 5 equals 20. Now I usually go all the way to 9 just to make sure that I have all my numbers out. But in this case, I'm only going to go up to multiples all the way times 5. Now I do the same thing for the other denominator. Okay? So 8 times 1 equals 8. 8 times 2 equals
16
24, 32, and 40. So now I've written down all the multiples of 4 and all the multiples of 8. Now I need to make sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Now to find the LCD, you need to multiply or skip count until you arrive to a number that the other denominator has in common with the number you are currently working on. Okay, so we need to find a number that they both have in common. What is the very first number that they both have in common?
16.
16 is the first number? Yes. 8. Exactly. So circle those numbers. And that is our lowest common denominator. It's not a denominator yet. We're about to make it a denominator. Okay? So we circle the numbers. Now, we're going to go back to the original fraction. But I'm going to start a new one just so that you see the progression of steps. So, step 3, I'm going to write the same problem out. 2/4 and 3/8. Now, we have to create our new fraction with the lowest common denominator that we created, which is, in our case, it's 8. So I am going to put an equal sign because that's all it is, guys. In this process, when we add, subtract fractions, we're actually adding, subtracting equivalent fractions. That's the only way it could happen. So now, what am I going to replace this 4 with?
8.
An 8. Okay? And what am I going to replace this 8 with?
4. Wait. 8.
An 8. Good. And it's on your work. It's on your work. Now, how did I get, now I'm going back to 2/4. How did I go from 4 to 8? Skip counting by what?
2.
So I multiplied by 2, right? I'm going to put this in parentheses just so that we don't get confused. Those are our notes. Now, there's a rule in fractions that if we're going to do anything to a fraction, whatever we do to the denominator, we do to the numerator. But it sounds catchier when we say, whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. Whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. Whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So, what do you think I'm going to do with this 2 now? Multiply by what?
2.
By 2, exactly. Remember, whatever we do to the bottom, we do to the top. Now, what is 2 times 2?
4.
4. Now, we've just converted 2/4 to 4/8. Right? And I'll explain what that means. So if I had 2/4, so this is 2/4, right? And we just had 2 out of 4 shaded in. Well, now what we did is that we just made it into, instead of it being 4 pieces, now it's
8 pieces.
8 pieces. And this is all you do. It's the same. It's our same piece, but we just made another line through there. How many pieces are there now?
8.
And how many are shaded?
4.
4. That's all equivalent fractions is, guys. This right here. So now we're going to do the same to 3/8. How did I get from 8 to 8?
Skip count. By 2.
Multiplied it times
1.
1. Good. Now, whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the
Top.
Now, it's important that you do to the top, to the numerator, and not to the other fraction. All right? You need to stay within your same fraction for this rule to apply. Now, so 8 times 1 equals 8, right? So 3 times 1 equals 3. Now, what do we have now?
3.
We have our new fraction. Even though our bottom fraction didn't change, we still needed to follow this process or these steps to figure out how to solve for fractions when the denominator is not the same. Now, give me a second. So now that we have the same denominator, we are now ready to add, subtract, compare, or find the equivalent fractions. In this case, what are we doing? We are what?
Times.
We're adding, right? But now this is our new problem here. We need to ignore all this other work we just did. Okay, now this is our work. This is the new fraction. So one thing we have to keep in mind is that when adding or subtracting fractions, you can only add or subtract the numerator. So what am I going to subtract here or add? Remember, here's the addition. Are we adding or multiplying? What? So 4 plus 3 equals 7. And what happens to the denominator? It stays the same. So let me draw my little box. So here we had 1, 2, and 3. Now what we have down here is now I am going to combine the shapes. So I'm going to get these 4 here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm also going to get these 3 there. 1, 2, and 3. What do I have? 7/8. And that's how we find the lowest common denominator. Say bye-bye.